Welcome to Are You Done Yet? The podcast brought to you by Innovative E, the 2023 and 2024 Microsoft Partner of the Year winner and a 7-time Microsoft Award winner in the last 6 years. Hosted by Mike Taylor, CEO of Innovative E, and Brian Quick, Senior Director of Business Development, this podcast is your go-to resource for transforming your organization's project and work management strategies, enabling you to become a higher-performing organization with happier people. And now, Mike Taylor and Brian Quick.
Hi, and welcome to Are You Done Yet? The podcast about your project and work management challenges. I'm Mike Taylor with Innovative E, and I have with me, as always, Brian Quick.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Are you all recovered from Los Angeles?
Oh, mostly. A little bit tired still. That was a big trip. All the way across the country.
It was a good conference. I met a lot of really great people, saw some familiar faces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always good to be around the folks in our industry and other partners and even competitors. It's a tight-knit industry.
It is. Now, as vendors and in the exhibit hall, we don't get the opportunity to go to a lot of the sessions or anything. So today's recap is going to be about the conversations that we had during the conference in the expo hall mainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was a 3-day conference. And we had a couple speaking sessions, right? And then our booth was just across the aisle from the Microsoft booth. So we were walking over there. They were walking over. We had people coming and going. So there were a lot of good conversations.
It was. So we did have a couple of sessions. So mine was how to modernize Microsoft PPM while minimizing business disruption. And I thought it was very well received. There were quite a few people crowding around there. And I had some good questions afterward. What we talked about was first of all, I don't know how many folks had the opportunity to stop by the Microsoft booth and talk to those folks. But they have a lot of really great stuff going on with the new planner, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, in fact, there was a Ask Microsoft Anything last week, and they reposted the whole thing, hour and a half, to YouTube, and it was very, very informational. They gathered all their product managers. They talked about all the stuff they've been doing. So you can really see, after they released the product, it took a while to really start ramping up on new feature functionality, but they're really starting to accelerate that feature functionality coming out. So it's really great to see.
Especially with what they're doing with Copilot, you like to see that AI feature in there. And there's a lot of other things with baselining and other stuff coming down the road.
Mm-hmm. Sprint planning and all kinds of good stuff.
What was that?
Sprint planning was one of the things I think was one of the new features released. Yeah.
I know they were doing a little bit of that now. They're going to enhance the sprint planning part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's good for people using agile methodologies.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. So we talked about that and how, what's coming with Planner and how great, the features have been and how they're rolling out more and more stuff. And we talked about the Power Platform, like the Microsoft Modern Platform. Now, a lot of folks are familiar with Microsoft platforms from using other products like Office 365 or SharePoint, or even Project Online, which was built on SharePoint. But the Modern Platform is what they call the Power Platform, and it includes Power Automate for workflow, Power Apps, and Power BI. And Power Apps, you can create modern app experiences, collect data, put it in a database, and Power BI for dashboarding and analytical and visualization of reports. So we exposed people to that if they hadn't been already. But a lot of folks, as I took a poll in the audience, were already using a lot of the Power Platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of uptake on it, a lot more than there was last year when we did the presentation, right?
Yeah, there were only a few hands. I think we asked similar questions last year. There were only a few hands. So a lot more folks are embracing it like we thought would happen. I would think it's going to become a very common skill set. And so the combination of Planner and the Power Platform and AI kind of create an opportunity to build on the Microsoft Modern Platform and create project management experiences. And we talked about that. And we talked about how, what does it mean to modernize? What does modern project management and on that platform look like?
Right.
Because a lot of folks aren't really sure what we mean by that. So there's a lot of folks that are kind of coming from where they're at. We like to meet folks where they are, right? In terms of, are they using desktop applications like Project Professional? Are they using Project Online? which is a SharePoint-based application, or Project Server. Some folks have seen Planner, but they have a good reason not to go there. And we talked about in that previous podcast episodes how a lot of folks are waiting for Planner to evolve even further, and waiting for like them to enhance baselining capabilities a little bit more, provide a little bit more on the portfolio level. And they're not ready to just wholeheartedly go over from what they're using to Planner.
Right.
And a lot of folks, even though they're exposed to Power Platform, and more of them are gaining skills, they're not sure they feel comfortable enough to build a solution the way they need it to be built inside their environment. So we talked about a zero disruption way of addressing this. So instead of worrying about whether or not you can take your existing Project Online deployment, for example, and move it over to Planner, is everything going to be there? Am I going to disrupt my business? Do I have to do a migration? Our zero disruption approach means bringing existing apps into the modern platform and repurposing only critical customizations and shifting the Planner over time.
Right.
So the customizations people have made in Project Online, Project Server, we can rewrite those in Power Platform. And you can continue to use Project Online, especially, and then start spicing in Planner where it makes sense.
And rewriting those goes much faster than the traditional way of using a lot of those legacy, C#, .NET, the legacy tools that we use, the Power, low code, no code, low code, pro code makes it go much faster initially. It's also much faster to modify, right? So as things change, which business logic always changes.
Exactly. So it's easier than ever to build those things. But in case you need some help, that's something that we're advising them on and we can provide. The way to kind of look at this, though, is you don't want to create another project management system in a Power App somewhere that people have to go there. You want to actually do this all in Teams. So Microsoft Teams provides an amazing way that you can centralize everything in there, and you can build Power Platform experiences inside of Teams. So that you can take Project Online, bring it into Teams. You can take Planner, bring it into Teams, and other tools that you have as well. And using this Power Platform experience, you can do the whole thing inside Microsoft Teams.
Yeah. And then all the visualizations are all part of the Power Platform as well, right? So people who are now really starting to embrace Power BI and everything that you can do with that, it's all just baked right in. And you can do, we other partners and a lot of customers have their own Power BI practices now, and they've built up capabilities to do all this visualization. And by having it all on the platform and in the centralized platform, now you can visualize things across. You might be using different workloads, right? You might be using Project Online. You might be using the new Planner. Might be just using Teams for some collaboration. You can do all of that in one place, right?
And people were really excited about that. Whenever we talked to someone at the booth and we said, well, what are you using for project management? And they said X, Y, or Z. We said, well, doesn't it make sense to use Teams for project management and bring those experiences into Teams, because that's already where your company is collaborating? And a lot of folks were like, yeah, I mean, that was like a light bulb moment. Didn't realize that was possible. But it like overnight would solve a ton of problems that they're having with adoption, right? Because it's a familiar tool. Everybody's using it already.
Yeah. Like you said at the beginning, zero adoption almost, right? If you
zero disruption, zero adoption, like driving it down to zero, almost to the point where it's like almost like you can go to your folks in the company and say, you know what, I figured out a way that we can use Teams for project management. Would you be on board with that? And I'm sure like 99% of them, they're already using Teams, would be like, I don't think you can do that, but yeah.
but you can.
But you can. And it's really, like we talked about before, bringing the whole platform together to make that possible. This is not something that you can just flip on. Now, we did develop a solution called Teams for PM that actually is kind of an out-of-the-box way of doing this, if you will, where we've created a lot of these constructs for you already in Power Platform, so you don't have to. but it brings everything together and automates and governs the use of teams for the purposes of project management.
Yep.
Leverages AI capabilities already,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of works with projects online. You can bring that in, Planner. And when I talk about Planner, I'm talking about both derivatives of Planner. The regular Planner, which is just like the task management tool, and then Planner Premium features. So what we're suggesting here is that, when we talk to people at the booth, I guess would be a better way of saying it. We talk to people that are doing a lot of different things with project management. Maybe they're using Project, maybe they're using Excel, maybe they're using Azure DevOps or another tool like Monday.com or Asana or Trello or anything like that. The idea here is first think about bringing solutions like that into Microsoft Teams,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where your folks are already collaborating. So you're instead of trying to get them to adopt another tool or go over here, first think about how to bring it in, and let's have a conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, what can you automate? What can you automate that's currently manual in your process?
Mm-hmm.
How can you leverage this platform to do that? I think that's a huge problem for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it
really
usually
is.
has to do with status reporting.
Yeah. And data aggregation using Excel spreadsheets and stuff to bring things
Yeah,
from multiple sources and put it together. Then it goes back to your status reporting, right? How do you get the information
right.
out to make decisions?
That's right. And automating your project intake, how things get started, and automating the reports that come out of it, either their executive dashboards or reports.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge boon for people once they get that figured out.
Yep. Yep. It really is.
So, a couple of other conversations we had at the booth was, like I said, people were enlightened by the fact that you could use Teams, as long as you're building in this construct or you're using our pre-created construct and then customizing it from there.
Mm-hmm.
That they could use Teams and really bring their processes, their business processes, the way they do projects, the way they do manage work into that construct, and it's extremely flexible.
Right.
That means that you don't have to go out and find another project management system and then try to get somebody to use it.
Right.
It also means that if you're on a legacy project management system like Project Online, you don't need to go shopping.
Mm-hmm.
You can just evolve that into a modern solution.
Right.
By taking it into Power Platform, taking it into Teams, and combining that data with data from other schedulers. Because we didn't build any sort of scheduler, right? With
Right.
Teams for PM. We're just aggregating data together.
Right. And making the experience all unified within a common experience that people already are familiar with, which is the Teams experience. And like you said, the underpinning is all of the the great capabilities of the Power Platform. And Microsoft's always been, and some people lose sight of this. They've always been about the tools, right? They've always been about creating tools to do better development. And the Power Platform is the latest generation of that, and making it much faster and less expensive to build and maintain business workflow solutions, which is it's out there everywhere. Everybody does it.
That's right. They are about the tools and providing like the ability for people to build from it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had one question, well, why didn't Microsoft just make what you guys made? And if they did, it would be kind of a no-brainer. Well, they don't. They make the tools that
Right.
we use to, and then we, as the partners, as a partner of Microsoft's, take those and bring it to another level. So we understand better, I think, what you guys are trying to do out there in your PMOs.
Right. Right.
And how we can bring all these tools together in one thing to be able to provide like a pre-created solution for you that you can build on from there.
Mm-hmm.
I think partners are closer to the customers.
Yeah.
And they know kind of what 85% of what you guys need out there, and then we can
Right.
build the rest from there.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? The partners are always the ones who do the last mile
Yeah.
work with the customers because it's an extension of the great tool sets that are all in place, and understanding the particular application of the tools. In our case is project and work management. But I think that's a good segue, if you don't mind, into you kind of covered your presentation. Mine was from chaos to clarity,
Right.
and and it was very similar. And you mentioned we kind of started by talking about there's every organization has a lot of project management tools. And
Yeah.
Standard Group says
How many?
5.7.
5.7. It's like when what's the average family size? Like 2.5
2.3.
children.
Yeah, 5. Yeah, that point 3 child.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So there's a lot of but it's not just the tools. There's also methodologies that have grown up. There's also
Hmm.
different standardizations and certifications and curriculum and everything else. And we saw a lot of those folks there. You would see Georgia Tech and a lot of other IAL, all these institutions that do training and certifications and sometimes degrees and masters and doctorate degrees in project and work management. So
Right.
um, there's a lot of emphasis on it, but over the years, what we've seen, and it's well known that the project success rates, as defined by customers, this is not defined by partners or analysts. Analysts are collecting this information. It still remains around 35% that people are
Hmm.
feeling like their projects are successful, and we believe that a big part of that is people just keep layering in more and more tools, right? So they keep adding on
Yeah.
these endpoint
It
project
can be a
management
problem.
tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you get benefit out of putting a new tool in because it does something for you or for a department. But now you've created another data silo. You've created a different
Yeah.
place for your applications and your people. So that app now has a different experience. So when you context switch, if Brian, you're managing something over here in Project Online, and then you go over here and it's in, maybe it's a third party app like Asana or Workday,
Right.
not Workday, but Monday.com or something else, that you have a different experience. And what we're saying is, try to bring that experience together, like you said, into the Teams environment, which is where a lot of the work management is going on anyway. Do all
Right.
your collaboration, do all your artifact management, do all those things there, and then use those endpoint solutions for the schedule management or task management as necessary. So
Right.
that's kind of the crux of the presentation I did. In that you can get everything together, and you didn't kind of talk about the same thing. You can bring all the viewpoint of
Sure.
all the work that's happening in the enterprise together. You can start to look at,
Mhm.
in the future, we've got some things we're working on with customers about now aligning strategic goals to project work. And now we'll be able to do that across workloads. So if you had a planner project or an effort that's being managed in Planner and another one's being managed in Project Online, now, you could both of those can now be aggregated into the one and now attached to whatever, whether they're both related to a specific strategic objective, or they support different strategic objectives. Now you can do it independent of the work management tool. So that's pretty cool. It's a way of thinking of really, again, putting the collaboration and all of the aggregation of the project and work management information centralized rather than continuing to disperse it. And so I
Mhm.
think we're seeing, with customers we have already done this with, a lot of value, and they're seeing, like you said, a minimally disruptive way to step into this modernization or bridge to the future, and then
Yep.
a way to continue to evolve towards that future in a way that they can do things much faster than they ever could before. Because, like I said, almost every organization with any complexity is doing some amount of customization and configuration around the project and work
Sure.
management. And now you can do it faster because you're now on the low code. Now you can apply the modern AI tools that Microsoft has, Azure
Mhm.
AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, M365 Copilot. So there's all these new capabilities to build right into having everything at your fingertips.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excellent points. What would you say about these, the third-party tools that are out there having these Teams connection apps? What's your take on that?
They have team connection apps, so but it's kind of, they call it left rail. So your experience still for everyone runs over to that other as soon as you click on that button, right? You kind of
Right.
leave the team's experience and you're over there doing it. It's just like, it's like a different launch point or a window into it versus having all of the collaboration capabilities in the team site. And then when you click on
Hmm.
that button, you're really only going over there for the project or the task management or whatever you're doing with that tool. So I think
Yeah.
that's my perspective on it. Is it kind of inverts the the paradigm, if you will.
It's better than nothing, but your data is still on that other cloud.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole different thing, right? um, so for
If you're
people
trying to
who are
consolidate the data, then you're not really doing that.
right, and and we do see customers starting to look at, and we've heard some of the conversations we had at the booth and things, people saying we have too many tools. We do want to start consolidating. What's a good step towards that consolidation? And one good step is to embrace the strategy of going with the platform first.
Hmm.
And that enables you to start looking at, do I have redundancies in these tools? And if maybe it makes perfect sense to have a different tool over here to do this because it really suits well for this department or whatever. But maybe you're paying for some redundancy there too, and maybe
Sure.
you're worried about your security a little bit and getting things spread to different platforms. So
Right.
and not being able to do that. So from a security and an automation perspective, having the data better connected and more centralized is obviously a benefit.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's a good point. It comes to mind too, like although we do advocate for using Teams. So if you're not, I mean, people are just drawn to it. You take the scenario of, let's say, a company that's invested a lot of, mind share and capital into a project online implementation, let's say like 4 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been sustaining it and keeping it running since then. They're getting what they need out of it from a data and let's say maybe even a compliance regulatory standpoint.
Right.
They have reliable data. They have dashboards they can count on. They've put processes in place where project managers know what to do, how to save their plans, like maybe even a weekly cadence where all the plans have to be published in there. So they have a reliable system.
Yep.
When executives view the dashboards coming out of that system, they know they can trust the information.
Mm-hmm.
And for that's great. And they, it's some work to get to that point, but a lot of folks are out there have done that. And then what's happening, I think, in talking to people is the collaboration on those projects. The solution for that in Project Online was the project websites, the web
Mm-hmm.
pages. And those would deploy when you would create a new project, and those would deploy automatically. And this is where you go to collaborate.
Right.
We're saving all the files. This is where we're going to look at the schedule as a team and understand that. I think it would be nice to a lot of folks if that information was in Teams,
Mm-hmm.
because I think folks are being drawn to Teams. Those project managers may even be standing up a channel in Teams to collaborate, and then
Mm-hmm.
sort of
Anytime. Yeah.
not using that project site anymore, right? Or only using it for some things. The other thing that those project sites used to do was risk and issue capture.
Right.
That should all be in Teams too. So there's this momentum to collaborate, and I think you can't deny it. Folks are just going to want to stand up a Teams channel. But then that has an opportunity to decentralize the data again, and sort of all the constructs and everything you've built into Project Online start falling down
Right.
as people are using Teams instead.
Right.
So I think it's a huge, it can be disruptive for a
Yes.
company to go through that. And by bringing Project Online into Teams and using the Teams for PM product really as a catalyst for that, in a very minimally disruptive way, you can still do what you were doing, get the results you were getting out of Project Online, but sort of allow people to use Teams in a constructive fashion,
Right.
in a way that's governed, and really solve both problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So when some of the conversations turn towards, well, how would we accomplish this?
Right.
I think we get into, this is where there's really no rocket science. It's, there has to be an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, where you're at, right? So you talk about meeting people where
Mhm.
they are. I think,
Right.
a fairly standard and well-worn path of, all right, you got a journey ahead of you. Now, one of the first steps is going to be to do this modernization. If you agree, customers agree to this is when they start to see the benefits on the other side of that modernization. So that modernization usually starts with some form of assessment, right? So you assess and plan, understand where they're at and where they want to go and what their objectives are. And then you help them do this modernization. It could involve putting in teams for PM, which is a real good catalyst to leap forward and get a lot of stuff minimally disruptive, right? And then move on into cataloging what all are you chasing as an organization, and now you have a limitless opportunity to go after these things with the new platform. And that gets super exciting. People light bulbs start to come off, and they start going, oh, I can do this and I can do that, and it doesn't take 2 years to go do it. We can do this in 6 weeks or 4 weeks, and you start to see a lot of momentum build and a lot of value creation going on out of being able to do these things that were really either super hard to do before or almost impossible to bring everything together and do it in this light. So we see a lot of excitement when people get into that journey, right?
We do, because they realize there is a way forward. I don't have to make big changes. I don't have to disrupt what I'm doing, the results that I'm getting. I can use the new tools where they make sense. And I can further invest in the Microsoft platform, because in this economic environment, I think a lot of people are trying to do more with less.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yes, all you project managers out there is a plan. A little bit of upfront planning, understanding what you need, where you're going. And then we can do this in a minimally disruptive way where you're starting to leverage the modern Microsoft platform and move your solutions forward. There is a plan, there is a roadmap, there is a way. And that's really what we were talking about most at PMI Global Summit 2024.
And I think those conversations, it wasn't just us talking. It's like you said, Brian, it was these conversations were naturally evolving with customers. A lot of people are facing these same challenges. And in fact, I'd say most are very similar sets of challenges of having multiple tools and trying to figure out the best path forward for their project and work management. And, part of this that we only brushed on earlier, but it's interesting to talk on is, to make sure we highlight as well is, we talk about traditional solutions that are done like Project Online. That's typically, your higher complexity parts of the organization, your IT, your software development, those kinds of things. Of course, you've got your agile tools that are used in that area as well. But then there's the whole rest of the enterprise. And so what we're really talking about here is all this work, all this collaborative work that's going on throughout the enterprise. You can start to pull all that in. And, knowledge workers, and we've mentioned this in podcasts before, but I think it's been a while, about 60 or 70% of the people that do knowledge work, which is 60 or 70% of the organizations, are involved in something that looks or acts like a project. Whether you call it a project or not, it has a beginning, you got some definition to it, and it's got an end, right? You got to go do something. And so now we're able to start capturing all those folks as well, and empowering them to do things with the tools that they might have just used spreadsheets or napkins or whatever, email to manage in the past. And we're seeing some real good benefit in those areas as well.
I specifically had a conversation with a gentleman that was interested in doing something more advanced for his PMO in terms of the maturity of like a system, but then was really excited to hear that we could use the planner tool for kind of that middle tier, we were calling it, of projectized work that really isn't being performed by a professional project manager. So like a manager that is in charge of people that has to get projectized work done.
Exactly.
That's really where Planner excels, is in those kind of scenarios. Planner with the premium features specifically, because you can create the Gantt chart, you can create the Kanban board, you can do all that and maintain schedule integrity, have some predictable end dating, and I think that using that for the less complex projects, or even the folks that wouldn't be comfortable in Project Professional, can be a huge boon for organizations that are looking to basically get a handle on that work, either from a what are people working on standpoint, or a cost standpoint, or just is it on schedule or not.
Right. Or just being able to do the work in a more effective and efficient manner. We've seen that where we've implemented solutions. Some are highly customized around particular workflow, but uses the planner scheduling engine stuff underneath. And some is just basically planner out of the box, the new planner out of the box. Like you said, for the more less sophisticated project managers who are still doing project work that need the dependencies and all the things that you can do there. And it just, we're seeing more and more of that start to happen throughout these enterprises. Now, in the meantime, you always have this, Microsoft calls it enterprise work management or project portfolio management. You're always going to have that component of work that's going on too. That's what we spent the earlier part of this session talking about. But it all works. It all can work together, which is the exciting part.
It is. It is. Is there anything else about the conference, Mike, that you wanted to add?
No, I think that's pretty much a wrap. It was a great event. Lots of excitement, lots of good conversations, like we said, and looking forward to our next event, which will actually be Ignite, right, in November.
Microsoft Ignite, where we're being recognized as Partner of the Year again. So that's really exciting in November in Chicago. I just want to compliment the PMI folks. I thought it was a very well done conference. I thought, for everybody that I was talking to really enjoyed the keynotes and the sessions. So again, nice job. Thanks for having us. It was our pleasure to be there and help participate. I think we'll be doing it again. Yeah.
It's somebody asked me about PMI. Somebody that's outside of it. I said, well, that's our people. That's our community. So,
those are our peeps.
Those are our peeps.
Well, folks, don't forget to check the show notes for any upcoming events that we have coming on. And don't forget to like or subscribe to the podcast. I think we're available on several platforms now, and we'll keep it going for you. Check out our websites if you have a chance, if you want to learn more. And please contact us and reach out so that we can get to understand your particular scenario. On behalf of Mike Taylor and the rest of the Innovative E team, thanks for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Are You Done Yet? Remember to like and subscribe and check out the show notes for links mentioned in today's episode. Leave us a comment or share your thoughts on today's topic. We value your insights and look forward to sparking a conversation about the future of project management. Join us next time as Mike and Brian explore how to minimize disruption and maximize adoption by integrating existing project management tools, leveraging the Power Platform, AI, and Teams 4PM to enhance collaboration and efficiency.